Yeah, just a little bit about myself. I'm coming up to 34 years. I was kicked out of home at the age of 17, lived on the streets, broke the law, went to prison, got released from prison, went back to my mum's. I begged my mum and stepfather to take me back. They said on the condition you don't drink, I'd last 3 days. They'd kick me out, I'd be back on the street. I'd break the law again, back in prison, and that was my life for about 7 years. I got into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous in 1990, just before Christmas. I was told to do 90 meetings in 90 days. I actually done 270 meetings in my first 90 days. In Melbourne, we had 3 meetings a day. We'd do the gallery group, we'd do the Flinders Street train station, and we'd do another meeting at night. And Saturday, Sunday, I'd do 6 or 7 meetings. And I relapsed. My mind the way my mind was working back then was okay. People were saying do 90 meetings in 90 days. I'm thinking, okay, that's 1 meeting a day, which is 2 hours of the day. What the hell am I going to do for the next 22 hours? So I kept on doing all these meetings. And then, like I said, I relapsed March the 3rd, 1991. I relapsed and went on a 5-day spree and got back into the rooms, and this time I started to learn. Because I had no idea what the 12 steps were. I saw them on the wall and just had no idea. I didn't know why I was powerless over alcohol. I didn't know why my life was unmanageable. I didn't know why I needed a power greater than myself that could restore me to sanity, let alone the insanity I was suffering from. And this is the stuff that I've learned over 34 years of working the program, which I'm not going to be sharing with you. And what I want to do is, in forward to the first edition, the first paragraph says, we of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. And to show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of the book. And I go back to, I think when AA started in 1935, and they published the book in 1939 and sent it all around the world. And it finally hits Australia. And the only Alcoholics Anonymous we've got is a book, Alcoholics Anonymous, that you buy from the shelf. And that's it. So that's where I am. I'm a student of the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous. And I learned that the book, when they say we, they're talking about the original 100 members that agreed on this book, that it worked. So I follow their path, because in how it works, it says, rarely have you seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed their path. And that's a path I follow. So I got told that the book was authored by 100 men and women that recovered, and if I disagree with anything in the book, I'm arguing with 100 men and women that recovered. And I don't want to argue with them, especially if they've recovered. And in italics it says to show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered. Another word for precisely is exactly how we have recovered. And that's what I found out about the book, and like I said, it's worked for me for 33 years, going on 34 years in March. In forward to the second edition, it says the spark that was to flare into the first AA group was struck at Akron, Ohio in June 1935 during a talk between a New York stockbroker, we know as Bill Wilson, and an Akron physician, which is Dr. Bob. 6 months earlier, the broker had been relieved of his drink obsession by a sudden spiritual experience following a meeting with an alcoholic friend, which we know was Eddie Thatcher, who had been in contact with the Oxford groups of that day. He had also been greatly helped by the late Dr. William D. Silkworth, a New York specialist in alcoholism, who is now counted no less than a medical saint by AA members, and whose story of the early days of our society appears in the next pages. I've highlighted this in my book. From this doctor, the broker learned the grave nature of alcoholism. Though he could not accept all the tenets of the Oxford groups, he was convinced of the need of a moral inventory. Step 4, confession of personality defects. Step 5, admitted to God, to ourselves and another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Is step 5, yet he's used the word defects in here. Okay, so step 5, defects, wrongs, shortcomings, all the same thing. Restitution to those harmed, helpfulness to others, and the necessity and belief and the dependence upon God. Now, our 12 steps come from a 6-step program of the Oxford groups, right? And if you've got a second edition, it's on page 292. I'll just put that up there for us. It says it was a Wednesday and Dr. Bob's afternoon off. He had me down to the office and we spent 3 or 4 hours formally going through the 6-step program as it was at that time. The 6 steps were complete deflation, step 1, step 2, dependence and guidance from a higher power, which you've got steps 2, 3, 6, 7 and 11 in there. A moral inventory, step 4, confession, step 5, restitution, steps 8 and 9. And step 6 was continue work with other alcoholics. Dr. Bob led me through all of these steps. So our steps come from the Oxford group. The Oxford group was 1st century Christianity. And they had the 6-step program, which later got changed to a 12-step program. Forward to the 3rd edition, the last paragraph, it says, in spite of the great increase in the size and the span of the fellowship, at its core it remains simple and personal. Each day, somewhere in the world, recovery begins when one alcoholic talks with another alcoholic, sharing experience, strength and hope. I looked those words up. I was curious about those words, so I looked them up. And experience meant knowledge. Strength means greatness. And hope means trust and confidence. And every part of AA's literature, it says, Alcoholics Anonymous are a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. So when I go to a meeting, I'm going to share my knowledge of my greatness, and hopefully I can win the trust and confidence of a newcomer. I can share my knowledge of my problems if I want, but that ain't going to win the confidence of a newcomer. The message, it says it in the book, the message which can hold these people must have depth and weight. In nearly all cases, their ideas must be grounded in a power greater than themselves if they are to recreate their lives. Okay, in the doctor's opinion, it says, we of Alcoholics Anonymous at the start believe that the reader will be interested in the medical estimate information of the plan of recovery described in this book. Right, again he's mentioned the word we. We are the 100 members who wrote the book. So again, if I disagree with anything in the book, I'm disagreeing with 100 men and women who recovered from that seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. And to show other alcoholics precisely how they have recovered is the main purpose of the book. It talks about Bill 3rd treatment in the hospital. I want to, in the doctor's opinion, still we're in there. It's page, I know all the pages are different in different books if you're following. The doctor's theory that we have an allergy to alcohol interests us. As laymen, as to our opinion, as to its soundness may of course mean little, but the ex-problem drinker, we can say that his explanation makes good sense. When I first come into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I was a layman. And if you look the word layman up in the dictionary, it says a person without professional or specialised knowledge. That's what a layman is. That's what I was when I first come into the rooms. I had no professional or specialised knowledge. And what was Dr. Silkworth? Chief physician at a nationally prominent hospital who specialised in alcoholism. And he was kind enough to give Alcoholics Anonymous the letter, the doctor's opinion, the chapter. Okay? So that way, I am no longer, once I understand the doctor's opinion, I'm no longer a layman. I am now equipped with professional and specialised knowledge. Okay. We're going to look at the step 1 cycle. Okay, now the step 1 cycle was formulated, or whatever, the way you all see it now. We put that together, the members of the Triangle Group in Melbourne, 33 years ago. We put that step 1 cycle together. I brought it to Adelaide when I moved here 26 years ago, right? And it is so simple to understand. Danny, Steve, Peter and myself sat in a room and we looked at this chapter and we changed the step 1 cycle from the Joe and Charlie step 1 cycle to the way the big book is. And the first thing he says is men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. The sensation is so elusive that while they admit it is injurious, they cannot after a time differentiate the true from the false. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. He says, they're restless, irritable, discontented, unless again they can experience a sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks. Drinks they see others, social drinkers, heavy drinkers, taken with impunity, without harm. He says, when they succumb to the desire again, as so many do, the phenomenon of craving develops. They pass through the well-known stages of spree, emerging remorseful, with a firm resolution not to drink again. Now that's the second part of step 1's in there. So when you look at the program, right, step 10, one of the promises in step 10 says, we have ceased fighting anything, anyone, even alcohol, for by this time sanity would have returned. So if step 10 is talking about sanity, somewhere along the line, the previous 9 steps, I'm insane. And if step 2 says, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity, that only leaves one step that explains insanity, which is step 1. And the insanity I had before I even picked up. Think about it. My mind was unmanageable, step 1, before I picked up. Step 2, I came to believe alcohol can restore me to sanity. Step 3, I made a decision to turn my will and my life over to care of alcohol. Step 4, I applied the action. Next, I launched out on course of vigorous action, and I tell you what, it worked at the start. But that heaven, that false God, flipped and gave me hell. Made my mind more unmanageable. You know, when I done my 4th and 5th step, I had nearly 300 resentments before I picked up my first drink. Talk about insanity. Okay? I already had fears before I picked up that drink. And I hurt a lot of people too before I even picked up a drink. So all my resentments, my fears and my harms, which the program talks about, was already within my conscience before I even picked up. I used to run workshops, and one of my exercises were how I felt before I first picked up. And it was shy, lonely, depressed, full of fear, full of guilt, full of shame, felt like I didn't fit in. And then column 2 was how I felt when I first picked up. I was no longer shy, I was confident. I was no longer lonely, I had companionship. I was no longer frightened, I had courage. So I had all the opposite. And that's a sense of ease and comfort that this cycle's talking about. So prior to that sense of ease and comfort, I'm at this ease and discomfort. You know, so my mind was unmanageable before I drank. You know, and he says, the phenomenon of craving develops. They pass through the well-known stages of spree, emerging remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink again. This is repeated over and over unless a person can experience an entire psychic change. So what I'm going to do is draw this cycle on the whiteboard now. I don't know how this is going to work.
Would you like the board moved closer?
No.
No?
So they talk about, Dr. Silkworth says, we are restless, irritable, discontented. Unless again we can experience a sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by picking that first drink. Now for me, I already had the fear, I had the guilt, and I had the shame. This is going to change. A bit later on, this will change to resentment, fear, and guilt from harms. We'll put it in now. Resentment, fear, harms. I had them before I drank. I was restless, irritable, discontented before I drank. When you get it onto this program, step 4 and 5 will get rid of your resentment. 6 and 7 are going to get rid of your fear. 8 and 9 will get rid of your harms. Okay? So we're restless, irritable, discontented. We get this thought of a drink. Studying the big book, we learn about a phenomenon of craving. Dr. Silkworth was classed as a medical saint for what he found was wrong with us physically. He says, what with our modern scientific approach to everything, we are perhaps not well equipped to lie the powers of good which lie outside our synthetic knowledge. If you go back to 1935, I don't even think they had penicillin invented. You know, so they weren't well equipped scientifically. So we just had to believe it. Later on it was proved that yes, alcoholics have a physical allergy to alcohol, they have a craving. Okay? So what happens, we pick up that first drink, we trigger the craving. We pass through the well-known stages of a spree, a binge, or a bender, makes no difference. And we stuff up. Every spree I went on, I come out with more resentment. Every spree I went on, I come out with more fear. Every spree I went out, I hurt people. Of course I'm going to be restless, irritable, discontented. Then my mind tells me a drink's going to fix it again. I succumb to the desire again. Phenomenon of craving develops again. I pass through the well-known stages of spree again, and I emerge remorseful again, with firm resolutions not to drink again. This is repeated over and over and over, unless a person can experience an entire psychic change. That's insanity. we're going to do is, I'm going to go to page 24 of the big book. And it says, the fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. Our so-called willpower practically becomes non-existent. We are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the suffering and the humiliation of a week or a month ago. We are without defence against the first drink. Okay, so what happens, for me, like I said, between ages of 17 and 25, I didn't obsess much with alcohol. As soon as I woke up, I drank. And I drank until I dropped, and where I dropped, I slept just to wake up, just to drink, just to drop. My obsession hit me hard when I come into these rooms, right? Where I'm sitting here, you know, and it's like 2 hours. What am I doing for the next 22 hours with this thought process going, drink will fix it, drink will fix it, drink will fix it, yes, no, drink will fix it. So I have this battle within my conscience. Right? My demons, they're attacking me. Right? So what happened to me is when my mind says drink will fix it, I succumbed to the desire. The phenomenon of craving developed. I passed through the well-known stages of spree. I emerged remorseful with firm resolutions not to drink again. Now I start the battle. My mind says drink will fix it. I say, nah. Remember what happened last time. So I bring into my consciousness with sufficient force the suffering and the humiliation of my last spree, trying to stay sober on fear and willpower. Now the word resentment in Latin means to re-feel. So when I start replaying these incidents on my last spree, I re-feel it. But I don't know I'm doing that. I re-feel it. So what I'm doing is making myself restless, irritable, discontented. And then my mind says, I know what I'll fix it. I drink and I'll say no. I'll bring into my consciousness with sufficient force a different lot of suffering, a different lot of humiliation. I'll replay that. Now I re-feel it, making myself more restless, irritable, discontented. Triggering the thought again, the drink will fix it. I had this strange mental twist where I forget about the suffering and I justify, if I don't mix beer with spirits, that shit ain't gonna happen. If I don't drink so early in the morning, that shit ain't gonna happen. If I line my stomach with milk, that shit ain't gonna happen. Maybe if I get rid of my wife, that shit ain't gonna happen. Hey? So I have this mental twist where I forget about the suffering. I forget about the humiliation. You know? And I justify it. And I pick up that drink. I pass through the well-known, I trigger the craving. I go on another spree, I stuff up again, more fear, guilt, shame, more restless, irritable, discontentment, and I'm gone again. Dr. Silver says this is repeated over and over unless this person can experience an entire psychic change. There is very little hope of his recovery. In the back of the book it says the term spiritual awakening and spiritual experience are used many times in this book, which upon careful reading shows it's a personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism. So when you look at that 12 step, it can have, having had a psychic change as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message. Having had a spiritual experience as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message. Okay? Bottom of page 24. Before we go on, I've got cycles here. So if you haven't seen the cycles, come and get one a bit later on, whatever. Now, from Dr. Silkworth, he's equipped us with why we are powerless over alcohol and why our mind is unmanageable. Okay? We are no longer laymen. Who identifies with that? Do you know, if we go back to that cycle, Dr. Silkworth says, men and women drink essentially because they, like the effect produced by alcoholism, the sensation is so elusive that while they admit it is injurious, they, after a time, cannot differentiate the true from the false. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. They are restless, irritable, discontented, unless again they can experience a sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks. They see others taking them with impunity. When they succumb to the desire again, as so many do, the phenomenon of craving develops, they pass through the well-known stages of the spree. How did Dr. Silkworth know us? He didn't drink, and yet we're all identifying with a non-alcoholic. Dr. Silkworth never drank. And he says they 8 times, them once. Now you know why he was classed as a medical saint. God got sick and tired of alcoholics dying and he said, Dr. Silkworth, here's what's wrong with them, help them. I identify with Dr. Silkworth's words. From that I learned two things, and we've got it on these sheets. A, I have a mind that won't quit, mental obsession. B, I have a body that can't stop once I start, physical allergy. And that's why Tony is powerless over alcohol. He says at the bottom of page 24, when this sort of thinking is fully established in an individual with alcoholic tendencies, he has probably placed himself beyond human aid. Unless locked up, he may die or go permanently insane. Stark and ugly facts proven throughout history. So step one, I learned about the problem. And the problem is, I'm powerless. Because of a mental obsession coupled with a physical allergy. Step two. If my problem is I'm powerless, my solution has to be power. Back in 1935, the power was a 6-step program from the Oxford groups. That was it. Later it changed. He spoke about an altruistic movement now growing among us. Right? And that's a fellowship. And he says, but that in itself would never have held us together as we are now joined. And it says, the tremendous fact for every one of us, them, we have discovered a common solution. We have a way out in which we can absolutely agree upon and join in brotherly and harmonious action. This is the great news this book carries to those who suffer from alcoholism. So the other solution is the 12 steps. He says on page 17 there is a solution. The feeling of having shared in a common peril is one element in the powerful cement which binds us. And the strong warning is, but that in itself would never have held us together as we are now joined. Remember how I told you I'd done 270 meetings in my first 90 days and relapsed?
Yeah.
That's why. One element I was trying to stay on. Like the book talks about, I become crushed by a self-imposed crisis I could no longer postpone or evade. I had to face a proposition that either God was everything or else he was nothing. Page 18, he says, but the ex-problem drinker who has found this solution, who is properly armed with facts about himself, can genuinely win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours until such a understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. Remember I said those words? In every part of AA's literature is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem. And we looked at those words in the dictionary. Experience means knowledge, strength means power or greatness, and hope means trust or confidence. So if I share this knowledge, I'm going to win the trust and confidence of another alcoholic within a few hours. Until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. In the 12v12, on page 23, we realised if we were out of control that our drinking even then was a mere habit, that it was indeed the beginning of a fatal progression. To the doubters we could say, perhaps you're not an alcoholic after all. Why don't you try some more controlled drinking, bearing in mind, meanwhile, what we told you about alcoholism. It was then discovered that when one alcoholic had planted in the mind of another alcoholic, that person can never be the same. Following every spree, he would say to himself, maybe those AAs were right. In working with others, it says, show them the peculiar mental twist which leads to the first drink of a spree. So when you're working with others, show them the peculiar mental twist which leads to the first drink of a spree. Also in the original manuscript, I sort of looked at it where they said, if you have decided in how it works, if you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any lengths to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. For me, I was willing enough to have a look at the original manuscript, to see the program that they worked, to see what the differences were. And the first thing it said, on page 18 it says, but the ex-problem drinker who has found this solution is properly armed with facts about himself. In the original manuscript, it says the ex-alcoholic who is properly armed with certain medical facts can genuinely win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. See the difference? The medical facts. Page 23 of the big book says these observations would be academic and pointless if a friend never took the first drink, thereby setting a terrible cycle in motion. Therefore, the main problem with the alcohol centres in his mind rather than his body. We can't do nothing about the physical allergy. We can about the obsession, right? The obsession is just a manifestation to the unmanageability of our mind. Page 29. When I come around, like I said, 33, 34 years ago, I was always told it's a suggested program. It's a suggested program. Yeah, on page 29, we were getting things like, there's no directions. But page 29 says further on, clear-cut directions are given showing how we have recovered. So they still slipped it in there. Page 85, much has already been said about receiving strength, inspiration and direction from him who has all knowledge and power. If we have carefully followed directions, we began to sense the flow of his spirit into us. They are directions, not suggestions. Now, there's a lot of information. I need to get to the instincts. Step 3 talks about making a decision. Page 25, we're going to be asked 5 times to make a decision. And page 25 it says, if you are as seriously alcoholic as we were, not as we are, as we were. So I recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. So if you are as seriously alcoholic as I was, I'm telling you, there's no middle of the road solution. We're in a position where life is becoming impossible, still unmanageable. And if we had passed into the region from which there is no return for human aid, guess what? Didn't help me. We have 2 alternatives. He says it on page 25. Go on the bitter end, blot out the consciousness of my told situation as best I can. Or accept spiritual help. This we did because we honestly wanted to and were willing to make the effort. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any lengths to get it, the question is, what is it they have that I want? It's not recovery. It's God. You need God first to recover. So if you have decided you want a relationship with God, then you're ready to take certain steps. Ooh, but at some of these we balk. We thought we could find an easier, softer way. 270 meetings in 90 days. Can't get any easier, softer than that. I place myself beyond human aid. Page. It talks about Jim and Fred. Back in those days, they told Jim what they knew about alcoholism. They told the answer that they had found. Jim made a beginning, but failed to enlarge upon his spiritual life and relapsed 6 times in rapid succession. Now, they told Fred what they knew about alcoholism. They told Fred the answer, but Fred was in denial. He's in hospital resting his nerves. Right? So they told him. We agnostics, page 44. Right? It says in the preceding chapters, Doctor's opinion, Bill's story, there is a solution, more about alcoholism. In those preceding chapters, you have learned something. What'd you learn? We hope we made clear the distinction between the real alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. And there's chapters, there's paragraphs in there that talk about social drinking, talks about heavy drinkers and all that. The book's not interested in those. It says if a sufficient strong reason, ill health, falling in love, change of environment, or a warning of a doctor becomes operative in their minds, they can stop on their own willpower and fear. I can't. He says, to one who feels he is an atheist or an agnostic, such an experience seems impossible, but to continue as he is means disaster, especially if he's an alcoholic of the hopeless variety. He says, to be doomed to an alcoholic death or to live on a spiritual basis are not easy alternatives to face. But it isn't so difficult. About half of our original fellowship were exactly that type. At the start of the book, it says 50% recovered at once, 25% recovered after some relapses. So you know why 50% recovered them at once, because they believed. Half the original fellowship didn't. But they went out, relapsed, come back, another further 25% recovered. So we had a success rate of 75% back then. At first, some of us tried to avoid the issue, hoping against hope we were not true alcoholics, but after a while we had to face the fact that we must find the spiritual basis of life, or else you ever hear that saying, there's no musts in AA? There's 53 in the big book. The alcoholic must believe that his brain is affected as bad as his mind. No musts. Plenty of musts. Lack of power. No willpower. When I'm going yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, when I say a drink's going to fix it, and I say no, don't do it. Remember what happened last time? I'm trying to stay sober on fear and willpower. But lack of power, that's my dilemma. I need a power by which I can live, obviously. But where and how are we to find that power? He says, well, that's what the book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. Not mine, it does. Page 47, we need to ask ourselves but one short question. Do I now believe? Or am I willing to believe that there is a power greater than myself? As soon as a man says he does believe, you know how easy it is? When you're making love with your partner and going, oh God, oh God, oh God. God don't exist, eh? Oh God, he don't exist. God, get me out of this shit, I'll never do it again. Eh? Here's something else to think about. If God didn't exist, you wouldn't need to reject him. Think about that one. It's because he does exist that we reject him. Page 53, when we become alcoholics crushed by a self-imposed crisis we could not postpone or evade, we had to fearlessly face a proposition that either God is everything or else he is nothing. God either is or he isn't. What was our choice to be? Now, we need to learn what our will in our life is. So if I make a decision, now I'm going to learn about what my will is and what my life is. And I'm going to turn it over to the care of God. Not ownership, to the care. My car's broken, step one. I came to believe a mechanic can fix it. Step two, I made a decision to turn my car over to the care of the mechanic. Thank God, on the ownership. Hey? Mechanic does some work, calls me, step 11 calls me, car's ready, come pick it up. Then I have faith. Yeah? My mind's broken. God made it. God can fix it. So when I make a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God, I'm making a decision to turn my thinking and my life is my actions. Now, what part of my thinking does God want? He wants my resentments. And he wants my fears. What part of my life, which is my actions, does God want? My harms. So when I make a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God, I'm making a decision to turn my resentments, my fears, and my harms over to Him. They are my defects in my character. If I had 100% faith, no. If I kept it, my 100% faith when I was born, I wouldn't have an unmanageable mind. It's just everyone else started to put their will into my consciousness. Their resentments, their fears, their harms. The first requirement is we realise that people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. Okay? So that's what I'm turning over to the care of God, because He gives us our will back in step 11. Because we're going to use it with sanity this time. So I believe I can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if I manage well. Now, in the book, I've got 10 minutes, which is going to be pretty fast. In more about I'm just going to do this. Page 55. Actually, we were fooling ourselves. But deep down in every man, woman and child is a fundamental idea of God. Oh God. Oh God. Right? It may be obscured by calamity, by pomp, by worship, oh God, of other things. But in some form or other, it was there. I've always been looking for a power greater than myself, just in the wrong area. Okay? The book says selfishness and self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, we step on the toes of our fellows, they retaliate, snatching everything they can get out of the show. Now, self-centeredness. I'm just going to do this pretty. I didn't understand what self-centered is, let alone what God-centered is. Self-centered and God-centered. In the big book, it's for those that have, the third column of your 4-step inventory is your instincts, your God-given instincts. Okay? And in the 12B12, we're just going to summarise this real fast. It says creation gave us instincts for a purpose. Without these instincts, we wouldn't be complete human beings. All right? And he goes into what these instincts are. And he talks about self-esteem. He talks about personal relationships and pride, material financial security, emotional security, and a sex instinct. Right? Now your social instinct is self-esteem, pride, personal relationships. Your security instinct is material financial security and emotional security. Now emotional security isn't emotional pain. The definition of emotional security is based on our needs for another person or persons. Some tend to dominate and some are overly dependent. I was overly dependent on alcohol to raise my self-esteem and pride. Okay? I was emotionally dependent on alcohol to gain relationships. I never stole off anyone sober. But when I was drunk, I became emotionally dependent on stealing someone else's material financial security to raise my self-esteem and pride. So there's patterns that we need to look at, and that's what your fourth and fifth step is about. You know? Now someone comes along and they hurt my self-esteem, criticise me or whatever. You know what happens to me? I get a resentment. Now I'm angry. And if I can hurt them, I guarantee you I hurt them. Now I carry the guilt from that harm. Now I'm restless, irritable, discontented. Now my mind says a drink will fix it. I succumb to the desire, phenomenon of craving develops. I pass through the well-known stages of spree, and I emerge remorseful. Personal relationships. You interfere in my personal relationship, look out. Oh God. You know, I get jealous. Now I get angry. Now I harm. I carry more fear, guilt, shame, resentment, restless, irritable, discontented, succumb to the desire again, trigger the craving, go on another spree, stuff up more. Material financial security. If you ain't got it as a child, you know what that does to a child's self-esteem? That lowers it. And then you're going around your mum's place, you know, you're sneaking into her purse and you're stealing $1. So you can buy a packet of Claridge cigarettes that cost 87 cents. And a couple of cobbers, those little mate lollies. You know? Sex instinct. Creation gave us these instincts. It says, creation gave us instincts for a purpose. Without these instincts, we wouldn't be complete human beings. If there was no sex instinct, the human race would die. Except it's out of whack now. There's stuff on TV that we shouldn't be looking at, but who cares, you know? There's stuff you walk down the street and there's shops there. You know? Emotional security, frightened human being, depending upon stronger people to protect and guide him. I become emotionally dependent on alcohol for self-esteem and pride, drugs for self-esteem and pride, people for self-esteem and pride, material financial security for self-esteem and pride. You know, so I've got all these other addictions. Alcohol is only but a symptom. We got to get down to causes and conditions, and that's what your fourth and fifth step is about. It's about finding all these little thoughts that are destroying you and recovering from them. Because we go around, we try. See, my disease works both ways. It stands out when it's mean, egotistical, dishonest and selfish. You give me this or else. You interfere with this, watch out. And then it's the suck side of it, where it's kind, considerate, patient, generous, modest and self-sacrificing to get what I want. What happens? Still the play does not suit him. Admitting he may be somewhat at fault, he is sure that others are more to blame. That's resentment. What happens on the next occasion? He still becomes more demanding and gracious as the case may be. Still, the play don't suit him. He tries harder. People snatch all they can get out of the show. Is he not a producer of confusion rather than harmony? Is he not really a producer of step 1, unmanageability, rather than step 2, manageability? Is he not really a producer of unhappiness, step 1, rather than happiness, step 2? And it's about looking at, it says our actor is self-centered, egocentric, as people like to call it these days. Self-esteem, pride, personal relationships, material, financial, emotional, acceptable sex, and hidden, not God-given. Now, a self-centered, egocentric person wants that. And they'll go around and do it with insane thinking, believing he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if he manages well. Now, a God-centered person, let's save a bit of time here. Or have faith in God. If you have a faith in God and people criticise you, God has your self-esteem, it ain't going to hurt you. Someone steals from you in deception, ain't going to hurt you. Why? We see them as spiritually sick people and we avoid retaliation and argument. If a person was dying of cancer, how would we feel? And this is the whole idea of trying to understand the spiritual side of this disease. This goes deep, and I promise you, it's worth it. If you know the battle that goes on in your own consciousness, that you had 100% God directed when you were born, and it got infiltrated. All these little thoughts takes away 10%, 20%, 30% of your conscience is gone, 40%, 50% of your conscience is gone, 70, 80% of your conscience is gone, 90% of your conscience is gone, and you've got that 10% left. You're going to fight. God wants his territory back. He wants that love within our conscience that he gave us when we were born. He wants us to fight back, and he knows it's hard without a program. So he gives us a program. He gives us a new weaponry system that we can use within our conscience and claim 20%, claim 30%, we battle. 40% of our conscience we get back, 50, 60, 70% of our conscience we get back. And we sit back and say, wow, this works. I love this new weaponry system. So I keep using it and keep using it, keep using it, and we conquer 100% of our consciousness at the end of the 5th step, and we get that faith that it works. But you've got to be fearless and thorough from it, about it. No holding back, right? And once you get that conscience back, you have 100% love, 100% patience, 100% forgiveness, 100% of everything that belongs to God, what he gave you the day you were born. Now, ain't that worth it? Ain't that worth the fight? Page 63, and we're going to be finishing on this. Last two paragraphs. Let's just do this. Step 1, step 2, step 3, we just let it short, eh? Next, we launch out on a course of vigorous action. The first step, not the fourth step, the first step of which is a personal house cleaning, which many of us have never attempted. Though our decision is a crucial and vital step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face. Step 4 and 5, and to be rid of. 6, 7, 8 and 9. Rid of the things in ourselves which have been blocking us. Blocking us off from God, blocking us off from the spiritual awakening, blocking us off from the spiritual experience, blocking us off from a personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism. Our liquor was but a symptom. We had to get down to causes and conditions. Hannah's got step 4 next. I hope you all stick around for it. And thanks for being here.
Yeehaw! That was amazing.
Always.
And with the serenity prayer?
Yeah, let's do it. Well, before we go, we'll close with the serenity prayer, guys. You may as well lead us in.
To a high power of your understanding,
God, grant me serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
keep coming back.
I'm still warming up.
Yeah,
Remember, I had
so
12 years away.
Thanks, Tony.
Warmed up. It was amazing. It's good. It's good.